Waiting for the record. I see the record. All right. Good morning, everybody. We left off yesterday at the bottom of Testament Aleph, the Mishnah at the bottom. So it says the Mishnah at the bottom of Testament Aleph. I don't know, 9 lines. So it says, "Shalbeis Rabban Gamliel hayanichnas v'shiklo ben etzbosav." Right. We're talking about when needs to go ahead and take. Remember, people send to their machzis shekel. It all comes to eventually ends up to Yerushalayim. They have all the money that was collected by machzis shekel, and then they take it out from there and they put it in these big baskets, right? Three times over the through the year, and then that money is taken out, right? So that money is taken out, and they use the money from there, right? It's not all used at one time. It's used, by piecemeal every day. They go ahead and purchase animals. They don't just buy, a whole flock of sheep with that money and just have the animals sitting there, right, in the base of Mikdash. They don't do that. So the money is used over time. Now we mentioned people go in, they're clean, they don't have any hems. So he says, the house of Rabban Gamliel, they used to go ahead and enter, and they would, to go ahead and give their machzis shekel. Basically, they wanted theirs to be on top. They wanted their shkalim to be included in the Torah and to be on top and then to be used. However, he says, no, you got to be like everybody else. They wouldn't necessarily use theirs, but they would be like every other coins. But they wanted the schus of theirs to be used. So he says the Torah, the person taking the money, right? He takes out the money from there. So he doesn't go ahead and begin the process until he says, should I go ahead and withdraw the money? They say to him, withdraw 3 times. And Tarmas Rishayna, so they go ahead and they take out the money. The chipa bekatavlios. They used to go ahead and cover it up. So they would take out money, right, to fill the baskets, and then they would cover wherever the money was being stored. They would cover that with baskets, right? With a leather cover, right? With a leather cover and vashnia, and then they would come and do the second Torah, right? The next point of the year, the chipa, the kavaras, and then cover that. And vashlish is mechapen. But the third time they took out, they never went ahead and recovered that. After that, why would they go ahead and cover it? Perhaps they would go back, and if they would, in other words, anything that was not taken, if the money was present and it was not taken during that Torah, that's called shirayim. That's called the leftover. We'll soon see what's done with the leftover money, but they didn't want to go ahead and draw again the next time they draw from leftover money. So therefore, they would cover it up, and therefore, and all the new monies would come in from further out places would be on top of the leather. Therefore, those would be available only for the second and third Torah and not, reused again. And Torah is Rishona Shel Shem Eretz Yisrael. So the first one was done the Shem Eretz Yisrael, Ashnia the Shem Krachim Ukafim Lan. The second one was done of the cities closely outside Eretz Yisrael. Ashlish is the other one the Shem Bava the Shem Mada the Shem, and the other one was for all the Medina Sarachogas. The other one was for all the farther out towns out in Bavel or wherever it was. Those were collected there. Zak the Gemara, Shabbeis Gamliel v'chulei. So he says the house of Rabban Gamliel, they used to go ahead and try to put their coins at top. The Gemara says, I understand. I understand. If you have, let's say, you got to take meiser, right? So you have 2 big piles. So you take the meiser for all the entire crops from one of the piles. It doesn't pater the friend. Of course it does, right? So why does Rabban Gamliel care why his money was on top? So your answer is no. Hanachas ruach Elohem. Right? They wanted the korbans to come with their money. So therefore, if their money was basically placed on top, therefore their money was used as a big schus for their money to be used for the first offerings. Satani, Shamas es kavliyos. So it says he used to go ahead and cover it up with these leather covers, these leather blankets, and also kulan shra. And therefore, anything once you go ahead and you take the Torah, everything left remaining in there is considered to be quote unquote shirai. And Tani shlishis hi haisa asira shebekula. Right. The third time they would take, I guess, before Sukkot, that was the one that was, I guess, the most. Shahayuba, Istarias, Shalzav, the Takana Shalzav. That was like the richest one because those were these expensive coins that came from outside Eretz Yisrael. And Tani, and says there now describes the process. Tarmas Rishayna, L'Shem Eretz Yisrael, L'Shem Kol Yisrael. They would go ahead and take the first Tarim for the sake of those in Eretz Yisrael and all of Shel Kol Yisrael. and Shnia, because in general, right, the earlier coins were for the ones, the people that lived close by, i.e. in Eretz Yisrael, and Shnia, the second withdrawal, which would come a couple months later, L'Shem Krachim, Ukafim, L'Shem Kol Yisrael, they'll also be done for the surrounding cities of Eretz Yisrael, and also all Bnei Yisrael. The Ashlishis, L'Shem Bava, Madei L'Shem, L'Midai, Sarachaikas, Madei L'Shem Medinas, Harachaikas, L'Shem Kol Yisrael. And the third one was done for Bavel and Madai, and also in the sake of all the other farther Medinas, L'Shem Kol Yisrael, and really for the benefit and on behalf of all Bnei Yisrael. And Tani, not Talmin or Shayna, they would take the money. Now the money was in the boxes already, so they would take money from the first box, right? And Alfi Shiesh B'Rishona Noitel Mina Shnia. And even though there was still money remaining in the first box, they would go to, remember we said there were 3 boxes during each Tarim, right? There was 3 boxes every time they would take out. So they would take from the first box, and they wouldn't necessarily finish the first box, right? They would take from the first box to take the money, and then they would start going ahead and taking from the second box. Alfi Shiesh B'Rishona Noitel Mina Shnia. Even though it was in the first box, they would take from the second one, Noitel Mina Shnia. The second one, they would take Alfi Shiesh B'Shnia Noitel Sashlishus. Even though there was that one, they would take from the third and Shlama Shlishis. But once the third was finished, then Chayz L'Shnia. Then they go back to the second one. Shlama Shnia. The second one was finished. Chayz L'Rishayna. They go back to the first one. Shlama Shloshim. All 3 were finished. Chayzer B'Shekel. They would go ahead and they would take shekel back from the lishka of shkelm they were not taken from yet. They will go back to the shiraim, the ones that were under the I guess the leather or whatever it was. They go back to the shiraim and take those. Rameir says Malim b'shiraim shami tzicholem b'sayv. He says the halacha of the shiraim really has a status same as the shkelm, right? Because those can be used potentially for Kabbanas Tzibor, and since there's potentially using them for Kabbanas Tzibor, therefore it qualifies, it falls under the umbrella of Me'ilah, because anything which is technically used for the Kabbanas Tzibor, i.e. Kachi Kachim, these Karbanos, so therefore one cannot get any forbidden Hana, right? And there is Kedushas, right? The Kedushas Guf in it, and therefore since it's Kedushas Guf, not just Kedushas Damim, therefore one would be subject to Me'ilah, and therefore since it's subject to Me'ilah, the Shiraim, therefore it has you go ahead and you take the money from there. Now, V'chein Hoya Reb Pinchas ben Yair Omer, right? We'll not get into this. I think it just hit me where it was from. I know it's brought down at the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim. So it says Zrizus Meviel de Nekiyos. One is Zariz, he's diligent. It brings him to cleanliness, right? From Aveira. Nekiyos, a person is clean from Aveira. Meviel de Tahara brings him to purity. Tahara Meviel de Kedusha. Purity will bring one to holiness, and Kedusha, holiness Meviel de Anava will bring one to humility. Anava Meviel de Yiras. And if one is humble, then it'll bring him to fear of sin. And Yiras Chet Meviel de Chasidus, that will bring him to piety. Chasidus Mavila de Ruach HaKodesh, and one is pious, then it can bring him to Ruach HaKodesh, right? And Ruach HaKodesh Mavila de Tchias Meisim, and the Ruach HaKodesh can lead to Tchias Meisim, and Tchias Meisim Mavila de Elio Zachor Tov, and Tchias Meisim will eventually bring about Elio HaNavi. Now, where do we know this? So Psukim, the Gemara brings Psukim for all these cases, right? Zrizim Mavila de Nikiyas. So being diligent brings one to cleanliness, right? The Pasuk says and says, and he's right when he was finished. So he was zariz when he was doing it. Then he would be mechaper. So therefore he gets kapara, he's atoned, and therefore he is naki from avera. The key is maybe the tahara, and that brings once he's clean, right? Then it brings purity. The Pasuk says right? And he atones for him, and then he is v'tahera, and then he is pure. And tahara kedusha. The Pasuk says v'tihara v'kicho, and he will become tahor, and then he will be kodesh. So we see tahara brings to kedusha, and kedusha mevi'elidei anava. Kedusha brings to anava to humble humility, humbleness, right? The Pasuk says. Kiko Amar Ram the Nisa Sheikhin Ad the Kadosh Shemo Marum the Kadosh Eshkon Ves Dakav Shav Ruach. So it says all those, right, who says, right, his name is great, right? And that is with the person who is right lowly, right? The person who is Shafel Ruach, right? So in other words, all the Kedusha, person who's Kedusha, he attains Kedusha, will bring him to Shafel Ruach, will bring him to Anova. And another the Yiras Chet, the Pasuk says, Ekev Anava Yiras Hashem, right? It says the result from anova, from humility, comes fear of Hashem, fear of Yiras Chet, and Yiras Chet revealed the Chasidus, Nebrich, the Chesiv, the Chesed Hashem Ye'elam, the Ad Olam, the Al Yirev, right? The Chesed will come from those who fear Hashem. So those who fear Hashem it will lead to Chasidus, and Chasidus revealed the Ruach Kodesh, and that will read. And by the way, this Chasidus does not necessarily mean the Chasidus that was started by the Baal Shem Tov. Right, this is really Chasidus. One is pious. He goes Lifnei Mishur Sedin, and is a certain amount of holiness. And Chasidus Medei Lidei Kodesh. That brings to Ruach Kodesh. The pasuk says, "As dibarti b'chazon l'chasidecha," says you will have the vision, you will have the chazon, right, referring to Ruach Kodesh from your chasidecha, from your piety. And Ruach Kodesh Medei Lidei Chesmeis. That brings to Chesmeis. The pasuk says, "V'nasati ruchi b'chem v'cheisa," and I'll place my spirit within you. Right, and then you will live. So there's Chesamesa there. Chesamesa the Eliyahu Zachru Latov. That will bring Eliyahu Navi. The pasuk says, "Hine Anochi Shalech Lechem Es Eliyahu Hanavi Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem Hagadol Anora." Right, I will go ahead and send down to you Eliyahu Ani before that great day, before the day of Chesamesa. So therefore, that will bring around Eliyahu Hanavi. And Tana B'Shem Rameir finally is Kol Mi Shekova Be'Eretz Yisrael Medaber B'Lashon HaKodesh. Anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael, he's kaveya land, right? He settles right in Eretz Yisrael, and he speaks lashon hakodesh, right? The lashon hakodesh, and he eats his peirosa v'tahara, and he says Kriya Shema day and night. He'll be certain that he is a ben olam haba. So Hajj Alach Perach Shloisha Parakim. Fine.
We'll get it. We're
gonna get it. We just gotta rush. Right. Mishnah. Next Mishnah says Mishnah in the bottom of Testament Bays. So Hatruma Mahayu Oisimba. Right. Truma. What would they do? What would they use the funds for? Right. That which was taken, the Turin, right? The Truma, right? The money that was taken from the Machzis Shekel. What would they do with that? Right. So Leichim and Tamidim Musafin. They would go ahead and purchase the Tamidim, the Korbanos that are brought every day, Musafin that are brought, let's say, in Shabbos and Yontif, in the special days, Nizkehem, and all the Nesachim that came along, right, with them, the libations, right, the wine, the oil and flour, whatever comes with the Korbanos, HaOimer. Now the Omer, which was brought a couple days ago, right, the second day on from barley, right, that was brought on the second day of Pesach, Ushtei Lechem, and the two loaves that were brought on Shavuos, Lechem upon him, and then the weekly Lechem upon him, the Kol Korban Sibur, and not only that, not only all Korbanos, but Shomrei Tzvich and the Shvis, also the people who used to go ahead and were the paid watchmen, students, the people who were paid to go ahead and watch the basically the barley grow, right, for the purpose of the Omer. They needed that because they couldn't go ahead and plant it. So therefore, if they see something sprouting, they need to go ahead and check on it. Neitlen Skaran Mishra. They would take their payments, these watchmen, from the Trumas Alishka. And Rabbi Yosi Omer Af Haraitz Misnadiv Shemerchinam. Even if somebody who wants to go ahead, if someone says, I'll go ahead and watch you for free, you don't have to pay me, save some money for the tzibur, he's allowed to do it according to Rabbi Yosi, right? According to Rabbi Yosi, one can go ahead and watch these stocks in order that they'll be available for the Omer. However, Amrlo, the Chum said to Rabbi Yosi, Af ata imer shein abayid ella, right? Mishel tzibur. Now you have to admit they only really come from Mishel tzibur. So if somebody basically watches on his own, so it's like he's the one donating the Omer. So it's not proper that it comes from the Omer. It's better that the funds of the communal funds are paid to an individual. So therefore, he's basically acting as a shliach through the payment on behalf of the community, and therefore the Omer is brought from everybody and not just this individual who did it for free. Fine. Zok the Gemara. Top line on Yud Amud Aleph, which is yesterday's blot, I think. So Ma'roz man Atzei Kohanim va'Amid Limanos. So the Gemara, Megillas Tainus, brings down different days that were holidays for these different families. There are different days, holidays for different families, and they would celebrate. So why did it over there? So Maraz Man Atzei Kohanim va'Amid Limanos. Why did they go ahead and count those days? Right? When they came back to Eretz Yisrael from Galus, they did not find any wood in the Lishka. These different groups of families, they went ahead and they donated on their own wood for the lishka. Muslim and they give it to the tzibur, the karban mehan, karban tzibur, and they give it to the tzibur, and they offer them as karban tzibur. They hisnu mehan nevim shebreihem shana malaya shafilu lishka malaya eitzim, right? V'yamdu ela v'isnadiv eitzim v'shalatzman shalayeh karban miskarav el mishalam tchila. So they made a deal with him. Says thank you so much for this year because there was no wood and you guys, donated on your own. Even in future years, if our chambers are full of wood and we have enough wood for the Beis Hamikdash, you'll have the schus of bringing wood on those days in remembrance of this chesed that you guys did on year one upon the return from Babel. And Amar Rabbi Yachas. So Rabbi Yachas says, Rabbi Yasi, this must be Rabbi Yasi, right? Because we learned the Rabbi Yasi Aimer, because Rabbi Yasi says in our Mishnah, a person who wants to go ahead and do something for free on behalf of the tzibur, he's allowed to do it, right? Even we don't say it's his and not the tzibur's. He can do it for free for the tzibur, right? So too, these families donating wood, right? Maybe now it's the wood of the Cohn family, right? They're the ones who donated the wood. So there's the corporate tzibur's. No. You can go ahead and do it for free, and therefore it accounts for everybody. So maybe it's the shita Rabbi Yasi. So he says no. Rabbi Yasi b'shem Rabbi Yasi says a different. I guess Rabbi Yasi, the name of Rabbi Yasi, says no. Divrei kol could even be the opinion of everybody. Maplik. In other words, what's it over here? The gufa shel karban, right? When it comes to the gufa, the karban, i.e. the omer, so they have the chachamim disagree, right? You can't have somebody watch it for free and donate it these stalks for the omer, right? It has to be paid for. But when it comes to the machshire korban, those things that are secondary, right? They're only machshirim. They're right. They only enhance the mitzvah, i.e., the wood that the fire comes to go ahead and cook, right? The korban, right? That's called machshir. That even the chacham would agree that can come from private donations. Machshir korban kol ama maydishu bishtana korban yachid korban tzibur. Everyone agrees that basically can transfer over from a korban yachid to a korban tzibur. That is no problem. Of donating that from an individual doesn't count as everybody, as the individual's korban. And similarly, we say Tana Isha Shasa Ksena Levna Sheira Tzibur. A woman can go ahead and basically, my son's going to be the Kohen Gadol. I'm going to go ahead and make him his beautiful, right, Kohen Gadol clothes. And I'll give it to the tzibur, right? And I'll give it over, and you guys can have it, right? It's not me. You don't have to pay for it. It's as big as for me. You're allowed to go ahead and do it. And I'm a Rabbi Yachad. Did Rabbi Yasi? This must be the opinion of Rabbi Yasi. Did Rabbi Yasi? Because a person wants to go ahead and donate it on his own, he's allowed to go ahead and donate it, and that's considered to be Kabbanas tzibur, right? So the clothing belongs to the nation, even though all the money and all the work came from, let's say, his mother, right? Nevertheless, it's considered to be Mitzvah tzibur. So it must be the opinion of Rabbi Yasi. So once again, Rabbi Yasi, B'Shem Rabbi Lai says, no, Divrei Kol, this can be everyone's opinion. So ma'apligi, what's the machlokes there? The gufa shel korban, the only time the Chachamim and Rabbi Yasi argue, like we said before, was only in a case when it comes to the korban itself, the omer itself, right? However, machshire korban, i.e., the secondary part of the korban, i.e., the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, everyone says that by just donating it, that can become a shel tzibur because it's only machshire korban, it's not the korban itself. And Masnisin Pliga Rabbi Yasi, we have a brayso that argues with Rabbi Yasi. And Oisen Hayamim Nohagi b'shas korban b'shaloi b'shas korban. When they used to go ahead and donate the wood, they would celebrate these days. Right? These families celebrated the special days. They would celebrate it not only during the time of the Beis Hamikdash stood when they would donate wood, but even not during times when the Beis Hamikdash did not stand. And Rabbi Yasi Aimer, Nohagin el b'shas korban bilba. He says no, it was only celebrated during the time of when there was a Beis Hamikdash. And the Ode, and what do you see from over here, right? So therefore, the tiny actually we can learn from here. It says Amar Rabbi Eliezer ve'Reb Tzadok Anu Hayinu b'nei Sna ben Benyamin. One time, so Anu, right? We were from the descendants of the sons of Sana ben Binyamin, who I guess is one of the people who donated wood, right? The Chal Tisha B'Av Liyos B'Shabbos, and Tisha B'Av came out on Shabbos. The Achinu Liyos Liyos Shabbos, and therefore we pushed off Tisha B'Av until the 10th, right? And V'Hayinu Misanim V'Loi Mashlim. However, we did fast the 10th, but not the entire 10th, right? Because we couldn't be Mashlim. We couldn't do the entire 10th like it was Tisha B'Av. Why? Because the 10th of Av was the day when they donated wood. So since that was their day of donating, therefore that's a day of a holiday celebration. So therefore, even though Tisha B'Av was pushed off on that day, therefore you see that they still celebrated even Shalom Bisman Beis Hamikdash. Fine, 2 dots. So we discussed the different karbanos that came from the Tarim. So Zak the Gemara, I guess, skip the parentheses. So Tama Tanina. So we learn over there. Any korbanos sibur, right? I guess the ones that were brought from grains, not the animals, come from Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz, mina chadash, mina yashan, or it can come from chadash, the new grains. Right, the new grains are the ones that were harvested and basically brought, right, this year, or yashan or older grains. Chutz mina omer u'shtei lechem, except for the omer, which is brought on the second day of Pesach, and the shtei lechem, the 2 loaves that were brought on Shavuos, right? She'ein boin ela mina chadash minaris. Those can only be brought from chadash, from the new grains, the grains of this year, and from Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Chuna b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Rabbi Shmuel, he says this is Rabbi Shmuel. The Rabbi Shmuel Omer ein Omer ba mina Surya, because this must be Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Shmuel holds that the Omer does not come from Surya, right? It does not come from Surya, which was outside, and therefore this must be the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. And Talmud Tanina, we learn over there, Eser Kedushas, hey, there are 10 levels, things that are Kadosh, and Eretz Yisrael Kedushas, Mikol Artzos, and one of which is Eretz Yisrael is more holy than all the other lands. Umay Kedusha. So, what's the Kedusha? Right? Because we can bring the Aimer and the Bikurim, right? The first stalks, the barley, and the Bikurim and the first fruits, and the Shtei Lechem, and the 2 loaves that are brought in Shavuos. Those only come from Eretz Yisrael because it has greater Kedusha than all the other lands. And Rabbi Chia, B'Shem, Rabbi Yirmiyah, says the Rabbi Shmuel, this is Rabbi Shmuel. The Rabbi Shmuel Omer ba mina Surya, because we see over here this must be Rabbi Shmuel because he only has come from Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, that's the part of the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael that the Omer only comes from there. And Talmud Tanina, we learn over there. Rabbi Shmuel Omer ma charish rishus af katzir rishus. So when talking about malachas on Shabbos, so he says just like that which we say, right, to do charisha, to plowing, right, is rishus. Is only that which we said is a person wants to go ahead and plow his field for whatever reason, he's not allowed to do it. So akatzir, so to the harvesting can only be done that which we aser on Shabbos is only katzir rishus. It's only if it's done not for a mitzvah. Yotza katzir aimer shu mitzvah. Excuse me. That would exclude the katziras aimer. That would exclude the harvesting of the omer, right? Which is a mitzvah. So in other words, that what you said, it's also on Shabbos, only if it's not a mitzvah. But when is harvesting a mitzvah? If you harvest the omer, it has to be brought on the second day of Pesach. So if we have to go ahead and cut that on Shabbos, if it's ready to be cut, then you can do it. And Rabbi Shmuel Kedaite, Rabbi Shmuel goes to Shaz, Rabbi Shmuel, the omer ain't omer by Surya, so Kedaite, the omer yatzek tzir omer shu mitzvah. So since Rabbi Shmuel says the omer cannot come from Surya, so therefore, according to him, that it's a chiyuv to go ahead and do it in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, since it's a chiyuv to do it in Eretz Yisrael, therefore it's a mitzvah to do it there. Therefore, he's the one who holds that it's mitzvah to go ahead and do it then even on Shabbos. And Mantana Shami Svicha V'Shvis Naitin Schar Mitshum Alishka, who is the opinion who holds that we go ahead and we pay, right? We pay people to go ahead and watch it. Now, why do you have to pay people to watch it, right? Because it's Shemitah, right? Since it's Shemitah, right, the fields are not guarded, right? They're not to be guarded. So therefore, you don't know if it's going to have. So everything is basically left hefker. It could disappear, right? So therefore, we have a watchman to go ahead and make sure no one takes these stalks, because these stalks would be perfect to do it. But the Gemara says, wait, why don't you just find a guy who has his own field, it's protected there in outside in Syria, right? And just bring stalks in there. It must be Rabbi Shmuel who holds that you can't bring it from there. You need to bring it from Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael has Shemitah, so we need people to watch it to make sure nobody comes and takes these stalks here. And Rabbi Yossi, the Devar call, he knows it's been very called because because if they don't have it in Syria, they also need Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, even if they could get from afar, we might not be able to get from afar. So at least we have something here. Let's have people watch it here. So it's not a stira. You don't necessarily have to go ahead and say it is the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. So okay, what about? Are you allowed to go ahead and grow and not? I guess I would say violate Shemitah, right? In order for the reassurance, you take one field and you go ahead and you plant and you do all that for the purposes of the Omer to make sure it's ready. And are you allowed to go ahead and do that? So Rabbi Chia bar Ada, boy kumei Rabbi Manis. So Rabbi Chia bar Ada asks in front of Rabbi Manis. So he says, "Lo nimtza b'kayim es al shirayim she'ein nechlin." L'chayra, This should be no different than if you now when it comes to the korban, right? Comes to the korban a mincha, right? So mincha is you take the kaimitz, you take a handful, right? You put on the mizbeach, or you burn on the mizbeach, and the shirayim is now fit to eat. If for whatever reason the shirayim is no good, then even though the korban you took from it was good, the whole thing is off, right? So it's over here. Maybe we can say that since over here that the korban shouldn't be good because the planting of it, right? Normally when you offer that on the mizbeach, the rest of it is permitted, right? The rest of the wheat or the barley is permitted after the omer is brought on the mizbeach. So, but if this barley is not permitted to eat, why? Because it was grown, right, during Shemitah, right? It was, planted and grown during Shemitah. So then maybe, so too, the omer shouldn't be good. So since the shirayim won't be edible, therefore the omer offering won't be edible, just like in a mincha. In mincha, if the shirayim aren't, the leftover flour is not edible for the kohanim, right, for whatever reason, then the offering is no good. Samarlei says, no, maybe it's different. Maybe it can be like those. We have 5 cases, right, that can be brought in tuma, even though they can't be eaten with tuma. So now there are exceptions to the rule that even though something is kosher to be brought, despite the fact that it cannot be eaten. So ketzad hayu isa. Now, what was the process of paying? Now, the issue is like this. You can't go ahead and just take money and pay somebody to watch it. So let's say the guy's owed $100, right? He's owed $100. So you can't take money from Hekdesh and just give the guy $100, right? Because that money is kedusha. You have to deconsecrate that money, right? You have to be mischal that money on something else. So what was the process? So naitel mas min hashulchani, right? So let's say Randy is a money changer, right? He's a money changer in the mikdash. So what does he do? He takes out $100 of his pocket, okay? And let's say and Ozzy's the grower, right? Or he's the watcher, excuse me. So Randy takes out his own pocket, right? His own private money. He gives it to Ozzy. He gives $100 to Ozzy for his work going to watch it. But night till the kites on the shemran. He goes ahead and gives it to the harvester, and he watches it. Actually, up until the omer is brought. Umevi mos michumas alishcha umachal in love. Then he goes ahead, and when it comes time for the omer, so then we go ahead, right? Then the hektish takes the money, the gizbar takes the money, right? And then deconsecrates the money, right? When on the food itself, right? So the $100 comes from the gizbar, right? And now Ozzy has the what's it called? Ozzy has the money for Ozzy has the omer, the barley, and then they exchange the money onto the barley. So they switch. Now the kedusha is in the barley, and the money is now deconsecrated in lieu of that, right? And therefore, so the Gemara says, wait, right? Of a Tavis Kain, are you allowed to do that? Says Rabacha, B'Shem Rabbi Abbas, Kol Mashitin Hein Hein Dama Mishav Rishona, right? So anything that was the amount to watch is much less. Now is the final product here is not equal to all the work of watching it. In other words, I'm not going to pay someone $100 to watch something worth $100, right? So obviously the payment is going to be less because it's more valuable. So nevertheless, the same thing happens. So too, the same thing was happened with those who went ahead and built the base of Mikdash. He said, what would they do? So now back to the case. But Randy was out the $100 because the money changer gave the money, right? But once the money, right, was deconsecrated, right, then Randy gets paid back with that money, right? Randy gets paid back with the money once it was deconsecrated, and therefore everyone gets paid, right? Ozzy got paid from Randy, and then Randy got reimbursed once that money was deconsecrated on the Omer, and now Randy can put that $100 back in his pocket. And Tanab, so they have the same thing by when they used to go ahead and build the stone workers there. The money changer would go ahead and give the money to the workers until even before they had started building. And once they finished, there was something that was the final product was ready. Maybe most they used to go ahead and take their money from the Shumas Halishka and then deconsecrate it on the final product because that it would pay for something. Now the kedusha is in the final product, and the money is deconsecrated. And since the workers were already paid by the money changer, therefore the money changer goes back to reimburse the money changer. The Tavis came, the Gemara asked over there, eyes and butter. And once again, because the final product is not the same amount that is going to be paid to the workers. And once again, Rabbi Yasi, Rabbi Bum B'Shem Shmuel, Kol Ma She'itein Hein Hein Demem B'Shav Rishona. The amount that was going to be used for the payment for the final product, the contracted price, that was going to be the amount of money that would be given to the workers and the money changer. Fine. Top of the Mishnah, Beis Nai Mishnah. Mishnah says Para V'Sayir HaMishtaleach. So it comes to the Para Aduma and the Seir HaMishtaleach, and the during Yom Kippurim, right? There was the animals that were sent out. There were two animals. There, even one was sent out. The Seir HaMishtaleach, goat. V'Lashon Shel Zahiris, and then the red wool string, right? That was used. We'll soon see. There was used in three places. The Lashon Shel Zahiris, the strip of red wool. All those, but also from the Trumas Alishka. And not only that, but Kevesh Para, when it comes to the ramp for the Para Duma, they used to go ahead and take it out to Har Zaysim to make sure that there was no Tuma, anyone taken out, they would not become tummy at all. The process, so they put a lot of money into these ramps. And the Kevesh, Seir Mishlech, also the one that the he goat, right? The goat that would go to Azazel, they would send it out. The Lashon, Shebei, and Karnav, and also the strip of wool, once again, the red strip of wool that would go between the horns of the animal, which stays. And also any water that was needed for the purposes of bringing water close to the Mikdash, and any walls that were built and any towers around and all the needs of the city, those would come from the leftover, from the money that was left, right, from the lishka, right? So we talked about money that was left over. All those monies that were left, those monies were used for these purchases. And Abba Shalom says, no, Kevesh Para, Kohanim Gedolim Moisim Mishalasim. No, the Kevesh, the Para Duma ramp was really built from the funds of the Kohanim Gedolim, would go ahead and donate their money. And Moisa Shira Lishka Maya Oisin came. What would they do with the leftover Shkala money? What would they do with that? So Leichim Behen Yenus Shmane Slatois. Now we're gonna have, I think, a four-way machlokas. So you went to go ahead and you purchased wines and oils and salatois and flour for even for business. And the money, the money they would sell and make money will go to hektish. That's Rabbi Shmuel. However, Rabbi Kiva Amir, no. So remember, according to Rabbi Shmuel, he says basically they use the money to do business with. Right? It was like their Kiwi kids, right? They got the money coming on Sibur, and they made a little side business, right? So to over here, right? According to Rabbi Shmuel, they had a little side business, and with the benefit is hektish. And Rabbi Kiva Omer, no, hektish. Not only that, we don't do business with the money of hektish. Also, we don't even do business with the money of poor people, right? That money is sacred, and you don't start investing it and buying flour and oils and selling them for a profit. And Meiser had truma mayoisin, but what would he do with leftover truma from the shkalim? So what, according to him, so he says rikui zav tzipui lebesa kadosh kadosh. They'll buy gold sheets and golden plates in order to cover and beautify the base of mikdash. Rabbi Shmuel says Meiser ha peiros kei tzamizbeach, right? The leftover money from the peiros, basically from the sales, from the profits, they use it to go ahead and buy Kates on Mizbeach, the dessert from the Mizbeach, right, for karbanos to go on the Mizbeach when it was idle, and Ma'aser Trumas Klisharis, and then leftover from the Truma, from the Shkalim, right, that would be used for Klisharis because they couldn't use that money was set aside specifically for karbanos Sibor, for offerings, so they couldn't really put it into the base of Mikdash itself because that's not an offering, so they would use something, the kalim, the vessels that were used for karbanos, so that's basically in the same category, therefore they would use it to go ahead and buy Klisharis. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Meiser Trumas Leketz HaMizbech. No, the leftover from the Trumas of the Shkalim went for the Ketz HaMizbech. That went for the dessert of the Mizbech for Kabbanos there. And Meiser Nesachim Leklisharis. And the leftover money from Sachim, right? That was used to go ahead and purchase Klisharis. And Rabbi Chanina's kind of Kvanim Meimer Meiser Nesachim Ketz HaMizbech. No, the leftover from the Sachim that was used for Ketz HaMizbech. That was used for for Kabbanos to be on the Mizbech when it was idle. And Meiser Truma Leklisharis, and the leftover from the Trumas Alishka, from the Trumas of the Shkalim, that was for Klisharis. And Zeh, the Zeh, Layumadim Paris. However, the last two opinions of Rabbi Kiva and Hanania, they did not talk about the leftover, what you do with the money from the profits of the Beis Mikdash, because they held you're not allowed to go ahead and profit with the money. So Zak the Gemara, we're only going to get to like a couple more lines. So he says, first of all, the ramp was built. So Kevish Paras, Rabbi Shmuel, Bar Rav Nachman, Shem, Rabbi Yonis, and Shlosh L'Shonis Hain. There were 3 red wools that were actually used, Shel Seir, and there were 3 different sizes. So the one of the Seir that was sent out on Yom Kippurim, that was Besela. That had to be the weight of a Sela, a Shel Mitzayra, a shekel, and the Nusara would be smaller. It would be a shekel. And there was a Masara, a part of the process of was, when you dip in the blood, they would also dip with the red wool string, which is brought down in the Torah. V'shal para b'shtei slime. And they had the paraduma, when they would include a red string that was also used to throw, right, in the fire. So therefore, that would be larger. That would be 2 sellers. They had to be larger. And Rabbi Chunia de Bras Chavrin, and from Bras Chavrin, which is a place. And so Rabbi Ba said his name of Rabbi Ba, Bar Zavda, B'Shem Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, Shalpara, B'Shtei Slayim and Mechza. It was 2.5 Slayim. V'Yista Makvin, Lishna, B'Esra Zuz. Some say it was 10 Zuz, right? 10 Zuz. And they didn't say it was 2.5, it was 10 Zuz in order to Lashon Zuz. And Rabbi Yehuda B'Shem Rabbi Shmuel says, Tamri Chachamim Havlan is a Kohanim Hilchas Shchita, Hilchas Kabbalah, Hilchas Zrika, Noitlin Schara Mitzvus Alishcha. You know what else was used for the money left over from the Shkalim? That was used to pay the different teachers, Tamri Chachamim, who teach the Kohanim the proper halachas of the Trumas Alishcha. And Ravacha and says Ravacha Rabbi Tanchum Barachia B'Shem Rabbi Simloi. Manhiges, Sefer Hazara, Nightin Schar Trumas Alishka. Also, the people used to go ahead and correct and make sure that the Sefer Torah and check and make sure it was all good. They would also take their schar from the Lishka. And Gida by Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yosef says, Shnei Dayanim Gazelas, Nightin Schar Trumas Alishka. Also, the 2 judges, right, in Yerushalayim used to go ahead and judge cases of Gazela. They would be paid from Trumas Alishka. And Shmuel Amar, Nashim Ha'urgas V'Paroiches. The curtains which need constant upkeep, right? The women who go ahead and weave those curtains, they would be paid from the Trumas Alishka. And Rabbi Chuna Amar, Mechumas Bedek Abayis, no, they would be paid for the Bedek Abayis because the curtains are not really part of, right, the usage. Rather, the curtains are more part of the building, and therefore they would be paid for the Bedek Abayis. So Ma'apaligos, Ma'achlegas, Shmuel Avid, like a korban. Shmuel says like a korban, and therefore it comes from the shkalim, right? And Rav Chuna of it, Kabinyan, he holds the curtains like a binyan, and therefore the money came from the Bedek Habayis. All right, we'll stop here today. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we will get onto the daf, and we'll still be behind, but we're staying to our plan. All right, shkayach everybody.
Shkayach, have a great day.